in these circumstances, when they see people like us and it's constantly happening, it hopefully it inspires them or empowers them to want to help.
Yeah, thank you. And what about you, Rep. Miranda? Why did you want to be here tonight?
A couple of reasons. One, this is hope in action. I think that's the most primary role, is that even as a legislator, I sometimes feel like I'm the ops. Like I come from this community and I'm in a system of government where there are only 3 and soon to be 4 Black women out of 200 legislators. And I have the most policed, most incarcerated district in the entire Commonwealth. And it correlates to also being the most of color. The second was because I knew Bobby Joe Leister, and I've had the pleasure to get to know, either in direct contact or indirect contact, all of the men who have been recently exonerated, and their stories need to be told. The sweet taste of freedom should be something that we all realize. When they founded this country on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we were supposed to be included and we weren't. And third, because Massachusetts has a problem. And we like to pretend like we don't. And we're not very progressive when it comes to criminal justice. And when you look at a state with 20% people of color who are Black and Latino, yet 70% incarceration, and second to Louisiana with the number of people who are serving life without parole, those are our brothers, they're our sisters, they're our dads, they're our children. And so to us, who actually have lived with incarceration our entire lives, either in community or in our families, it means a very big deal that we're doing this together.
Thank you. And that actually is a really good segue to something I wanted to tell everyone here. So there were 8 men wrongfully convicted who spoke during tonight's event. 5 of those 8 were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for murders they didn't commit. And 4 out of those 5 men, including the 2 on this panel, are Black men. 4 out of the 5. Starting with you, Rep. Miranda, what role does race play? Can you talk about that for the folks who don't see it every day?
Race has everything to do with this. I believe life without parole is death by incarceration. Many people who know me know that I lost my youngest brother, Michael, 3 years ago to gun violence. And many people have asked me, how could I be the co-filer and soon to be filer of the life without parole legislation here in the Commonwealth when I want justice for my family? And I said, yes, but I've also been the legislator who's the only one in the entire state who has a current sibling who's incarcerated, who had a brother and a father who were incarcerated and deported. And when I go visit these places where our brothers and sisters are sitting, I come to realize that this is staring back at me, my community. And so I feel like between the data that I just shared earlier and between us not believing in the death penalty, but sending people to death every day, and some of the shoddy work that we've seen from people who are meant to protect and serve us, we're lucky here in Suffolk County. We have DA Rachel Rollins, but for the other 10 counties that don't have someone that is as progressive as her, we have people that have been going to jail. And one thing you didn't mention was that not only are the 4 out of 5 Black men, but they went in as juveniles. And I think that's an important thing to note, that I am not the same woman I was when I was 18. And therefore everyone deserves an opportunity to go ahead in front of the parole board after serving some time to plead their case.
Well, what do you think, Keyon? You went in as a juvenile, you were sentenced to life without parole, you were given a parole hearing, that didn't go great. Can you talk about what happened?
So I'll just piggyback off of, it's very important for children and every person to have a chance to be able to redeem themselves, right? Children more than ever, because like she said, when she was 18, she wasn't the same person as she is as a grown woman, nor is any of the youth now. So I had the luxury and the misfortune to be around some of these men and watch them when they came in younger than me, and watch them go through the system. And as they try to, first make themselves out what happened? So first make themselves out to be, somebody that can live in prison. And then as they start migrating into programs and kind of learning and taking ownership over their own lives, right? That's the transforming type of situation, right? And, you have people like Sean and Daryl, Gus Swafford, Mac Hudson, guys who Fuquan that kind of push guys to learn, and they really do change. So it's important to give these individuals a shot, and a real shot, not a shot when they come in here and as long as they say whatever it is that you need them to say so you can have plausible deniability if they do something else, but really give them a shot and listen.
Sean, we've talked about a bunch of things right now: race, getting sentenced to life without parole for murder. Why wouldn't you think that murder cases would be the ones that are the best investigated, that where you would have the least problems? But that's not what we're seeing. Can you talk about that?
Yes. There's times where, unfortunately, there's murders that happen in a community, and at times there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to solve those crimes, and in those instances, and more often than not, I would say that there's not really thorough investigations into homicides. There's rather a identification of someone who like someone to identify in order to make the crime fit, rather than investigating the crime and letting the circumstances and the evidence of that crime lead them to the correct person. But also, if there's time, would like to speak to the role that race plays in the criminal justice system. Because there was a particular era. Here in Suffolk County where and really all over the United States, but because I'm from Suffolk County, is where young Black and brown boys were criminalized for no other reason but the color of their skin. And here in Massachusetts, that led to our era of mass incarceration. And there really hasn't been a revisiting of that era. And so where, there's corruption and things of that nature that was allowed to take place, there's nothing really that's been done to remedy that culture and that experience. And that's really what leads to wrongful convictions.
Keyon, do you want to speak more on that? You were nodding when Sean was talking about, just not doing the investigation, but just sort of focusing on someone. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I was just nodding because, I agree with what he was saying. Like, it's interesting how an individual that wasn't there at all when whatever happened can come in and just get an idea and just say, yeah, this is right. This is right. And I'm going to try to make everything fit what I say is right. And then be shocked when later on it comes out that the person was wrong. And it's like, well, okay, you're home now, be happy, So I was just talking to that. And, as far as, Sean's older than me. So there's certain things I wasn't part of that he got to experience. But I will say that, the people that's being trained have to learn how to understand the people that they're policing. There's a culture gap that happens all the time. So if I feel like I'm being wronged, I may talk more energetic or louder and my female counterparts as well. But it doesn't mean that I'm or her is being aggressive. That's how we express. I talk with my hands. If you're talking to me as an officer and you're saying, stop using your hands, but I'm so used to using my hands, I'm probably gonna have a bad time, right? But you're in my community, policing my people. So you have to have some type of understanding when it comes to that and not fear. And maybe people will take the time to do it the right way.
Thanks, Keyon. I want to ask Sean and Keyon what their priorities for change is, and then I want to turn to Representative Miranda to see how she responds as someone who is a change maker. Sean.
My priority for change really is bringing awareness to the community, because it's within the community that we elect people who go into office and represent what our communal interests are. And so for me, that's where it all starts at. It starts within raising the level of awareness within the community.
What about you, Keyon?
I mean, I think he, he said it how I would say it. I agree with what the brother's saying. And, I feel like education is important, but I feel like people meshing more, like AVP type of settings where people that come from different backgrounds can be around each other and have these different tasks that they do together so that they realize that, we're more alike than different. And that'll go a long way, because it's been so many times that people came into the prison to like deal with us and be like, yo, I thought it was totally different, almost like they didn't expect us to be human, right? And it's troubling. So I feel like that's something that's important. I feel like prior to, Rachel Rollins getting elected, I don't think my community even knew that we had a say-so in, picking a district attorney. I know I didn't, right? So we, civics, we need to learn that. And if there's a way that I can further that so that information's out there, then I'll do that.
Well, the community had a say-so, and Rep. Miranda was chosen on that. What do you have to say about what are your priorities for change, and how do you respond to not just, what Sean's talking about, awareness and education, and also I think what he's talking about is the humanity that Keyon is saying. That's what people don't see.
I do agree that, electing the type of people that actually understand the lived experiences of people in our community is critically important. In 2018, when Massachusetts elected Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, DA Rollins, myself, and Representative Nika Elugardo, for the first time in history, 4 Black women were elected on the same night. And I'm going to shout them all out because I think we all 4, including joining in people, electors of color across the Commonwealth, have really stepped up to fight for our brothers and sisters behind the wall because of our experiences, because we have lived and had family and loved ones that continue to be incarcerated. But the bigger challenge here, I think, is addressing structural racism and the individual racism that lingers in this country's narrative, that there's this is wanting to not acknowledge Massachusetts as a place that, was the first to sort of make slavery legal, because we like to talk about how much we were abolitionists, because that's the narrative that we want to play. And so with structural racism, there's a lot more work that we have to do to address white supremacy in this country, in this Commonwealth. I think the places where we can make the most change really quickly is pass a police accountability bill in this session or the next. You can't say Black Lives Matter and then sit on legislation that's going to save Black lives. The second, we have to end the practice of life without parole in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As you can see, I could have went through a list of names: Darrell Jones, Ellis, Clay, Bobby Joe, James Watson. If this many people, particularly Black men, are being exonerated and set free for wrongful convictions that I want to spend a moment talking about, a lot of times the perception of Black men is that they are aggressive, they're not deserving of compassion or forgiveness. There's this preponderance of criminality, like you got to be guilty. And so it happens in courtrooms, it happens with policing, it happens with other people in law enforcement. And that's something that we actually have to shed, because until we do that, what's going to happen is that people will keep coming into court, and they'll keep getting these over sentences, like is happening in Massachusetts. And we don't need another Harvard report, but I'm glad we had a Harvard report that said that we have a sentencing problem here in the Commonwealth. So I would love to see us work on the racial inequities and injustices that are prevalent in all sectors here in the Commonwealth as a step forward out of this progress that we're trying to make together.
Thank you. I want to see if Sean or Keyon want to respond to any of that. I know you said a lot of things that I know resonate. And Sean, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, not even to add to that, because when something's well said, it's not to be added to. But I definitely will want to cover the other part, right? Whereas we as a community, we elect these people into office, right? And we elect them because they're in line with what our communal agenda is, right? But then we as a community still have an obligation to stay engaged. Because if we don't stay engaged, and then our elected officials begin to get pushback, right, from the establishment that is perpetuating white supremacy, right, we don't empower them and let them know that come next re-election, we still got your back. You know what I mean? So it's as a community, we definitely need to raise our level of awareness, but then we also need to reinforce that with our continued engagement. And so that's all that I would add on to what my dear sister was saying with regards to dealing with or addressing the inequities and structural racism.
Keyon, you're good. So first, I just wanted to say there's just all these messages coming in that are so supportive of Sean and Keyon, which is really excellent and so thoughtful. I think it's hard for people to speak about something so difficult in their lives, and Sean and Keyon keep doing it because of how much that they want to change and want to prevent this from happening to other people. I want to ask you, sometimes I get asked this question about, aren't wrongful convictions things of the past? Sean was wrongfully convicted more than, about 25 years ago now. And Keyon, 20 years ago, have things changed? Different people are getting voted in. Have things changed? Are things changing?
For me, I believe things change. Things go really slow, like really, really, really slow. But I do believe things are changing, like, just the progression of just the law itself. At one point, we was a death penalty state. Then it went from the death penalties, unconstitutional under us, under our article, not under the country's. Now we're saying that juveniles shouldn't be doing life without the possibility of parole, even though that stops at 17. Like an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old or a 19-year-old's brain is just that different, but they're all in school together, right? It makes no sense, right? And on top of that, the science shows that the mens rea is not developed to 23 and a half, 24. Some even say 25, pick a number. It's still higher than 17, right? So you have all these guys who saying, well, he was 17, I was 18. I wish I got arrested at this. Just crazy, because everybody wants that chance to show that they can be. right? So I just feel like, I don't know, it's tough when you talk about the juvenile issue with me, because I literally, this isn't something that me and Sean started doing when we came out of prison. We was in programs with the AACC that we're still members of out here, that literally connects with the people on the outside to see how can we help. So we already was doing this in prison. I got vilified for it, to the fact that I got kicked out of a prison because I was chairman of this program. After Diamond Jones got kicked out, then Mac Hudson got kicked out. Before that, Fuqua got kicked out, and then I got kicked out because of this program. You know, so there's always pushback against, it seems like, Black or brown people trying to do anything together to really just service the community. So the only thing that I'm doing is more of what I was doing in there. I just can do it a little bit better, because who can really stop me now? You know, you can't like cut off my phone or put me in a hole or not let my visit come in or keep perpetually sitting me in the same spot. You can't do none of that. So that's how I feel.
What about you, Sean?
Has things changed? I would say this, that the more things change, the more they remain the same, right? And that's the premise of, you know, at one point, Black and brown people were enslaved because of the color of their skin, right? And that says to me that it was their skin color that was illegal. And then that was abolished. Slavery was so-called abolished, okay? And it's like now we enact laws that are codified and so on and so forth within the system, right? That is set up at the disadvantage of Black and brown people, right? And then the circumstances arise where they find themselves incarcerated, whether it's wrongfully or not, right? And so now that incarceration is just slavery by another name. And so as things change, things remain the same.
Thank you, Sean. Rep Miranda, you want to weigh in on this question?
Those are such heavy answers and so real. And I just want to remind, you know, oftentimes when activists are lobbying the State House, people lobby on different issues. And I'm really calling out to the people of the Commonwealth and those watching around to understand that mass incarceration is the human rights issue of our time. And we cannot ignore it. We cannot wish it away. We can't turn our backs to work on climate change and work on other issues. We must work on these things together because they're all interconnected. And so I remain hopeful because, you know, a year in my term, I got to see Keyon and a bunch of brothers, and they weren't free. And to see them free and to see the other gentlemen and other women who are being de-incarcerated or let go, exonerated, just gives me hope to know that if we put pressure together, if we begin to change public opinion so that we can impact public policy, we're going to make a huge difference, not only here in Massachusetts, but I hope across the country. And so for me, I've remained hopeful because ain't nobody got time to be depressed. You know, I still have a sibling who's incarcerated. I still have a murder trial that I'm going to be going through in the next year. Even as a legislator, I have a brother and a father who are deported, who need me, who are in other countries. And so I try to remain as positive as possible because there's other people like Keyon had mentioned earlier who are behind these walls just hoping for a glimpse of hope, hoping that we actually improve the criminal justice reform law in this country to raise the age, particularly also here in Massachusetts, from 17 maybe to 21 or 22 or further, because we know that the science and the data tells us that minds are not fully built, or I can use a better word right now because I'm a little emotional about tonight's showing. And I think we all need to support organizations like the New England Innocence Project, support Court Watch, support Deeper Than Water, support local bail funds in your town and city, but also Families for Justice and Healing, who's doing great work here in Roxbury. We've got to support these organizations because grassroots organizations depend on our giving. And if we don't give, they don't stay alive and stay strong. And we know that when we invest in them, we're investing in a whole community of exonerees and families that are benefited by having their loved ones return. So I'm going to stay hopeful. And I know Keyon and Sean are with me in that, that we're going to keep working on the inside and we're going to keep working on the outside, and we're going to do this together so that we can actually make a change.
Thank you. This is, I think, going to be the last question, which is mostly, Rep. Miranda already talked about some things that people can do. There's local organizations, there's voting, there's supporting causes, there is calling your legislator and saying what you want. There's a lot of things about using your voice and being hopeful. People who have been writing in are talking about, being angry and wanting to do something. And, Keyon talked about being angry tonight and sort of how that fuels revolutions. So I'm going to first turn to Keyon and ask, what should these folks do with their anger, their righteous outrage? And you're on mute, just so you know.
Are you talking about people in the public or people incarcerated?
Both.
I knew you was going to do that. I knew you was going to. As soon as it came out of my mouth, I said this was going to happen. For the people inside, I feel like they need it. We got this thing called Know Your Smoke that I keep saying Fuquan, his name is Ricky McGee, right? But Ricky McGee came up with, and it's like we use smoke, or the youth use smoke as something like when they don't get along with each other, right? So the idea was know your smoke, meaning the people that look like you that grew up down the street or grew up in another project because their parents couldn't afford to live outside of some, public housing, just like your family couldn't, but y'all just lived in different spots. That's not the person that you have an issue with. The people that you have an issue with is the people or the structure itself that's putting you in that situation in the first hand, right? So first you should know your smoke. Then keep your anger and sharpen your mind. Empower yourself to be able to help the people who's trying to help you. Teach them how to help you, right? For the people that's out here, family or not, I believe that life is real out here, as I learned, and there's a lot of responsibilities that come on a person, but you should always try to make someone outside of yourself a priority too. And I feel like if people just keep that simple principle, like, you know what, I have a family member that's in prison and I haven't written him, I haven't did this, I haven't did anything for the sisters that's in prison who hang themselves at alarm and rape, right? Let me take the time to send a letter or email or a visit or pick up a phone call or send $1 or anything, and on top of that, let me connect with some of these groups that support people in there so that I know how to aid my loved one, especially for the most of them that's coming home. A lot of family don't know how to even deal with their loved one that's coming home. And we don't really know how to teach them because we just coming home for the first time or maybe the second time and not realizing that there's a science to making this work together, and a lot of patience is needed. So I'll say that.
Thank you. Sean, you are our trustee, so you get the last word.
So before we close out tonight, if I can, I'd like to lift up a couple of people into the space. A couple of my dear brothers, Ricky McGee, who I believe is wrongfully convicted. Stephen Pina, who I also believe is wrongfully convicted. Phil Rise, there's Mac Hudson, there's Stephen James. I just want to bring them into the space because those are men who, among others, Tommy Kuntz, who I believe are in prison and should no longer be in prison. That there's some who I named who I believe are wrongfully convicted, and there's some who are in prison that just been in there for 30, 40 years. Kevin Kemp, that you know, are not in there causing problems and, you know, are deserving of coming home. But what can people do? I'm always gonna say you have to elevate your awareness, but it's like, what can you do with that righteous anger? Definitely follow me on my IG page, Ellis K. Sean. Friend me on Facebook, because it's really starting a movement that's going to be carried into supporting our elected officials when they step out to do the right thing. To definitely visit the website of the New England Innocent Project, and that's all I got to say for now. I'm just super excited by the amount of energy that is really being galvanized around, you know, the criminal justice system and the need for reform.
Thank you, Sean. So we're going to close out tonight. I know there's so much energy, which is really exciting. You know, Sean and I have talked a lot about how, you know, there's movements out there, and there needs to be a movement. There needs to be an innocence movement. There needs to be an innocence movement that's supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. There needs to be these intersections. There needs to be these collaborations. There needs to be people rising up. And we're so glad that you are all here to witness this, hold people in power accountable. They're not all like Rep. Miranda. Did you know that? And I just wanted to say again that I'm grateful, first of all, to all of you, Sean and Keyon and Rep. Miranda, for being here. I'm grateful for all of the exonerees who spoke during the event. Looking forward, giving this ring to Jimmy Watson. He's waited a really long time for it. Let's hope other people don't have to wait so long. Good night, everyone.